everyone, welcome to this week's episode on the Evidence-Based Pilates Podcast, and this is a juicy one. We are going to talk about living in the gray with core stability, and we're going to have this be exemplified by low back pain. So it's like the classic conversation of like core strength or core stability for low back pain, and we're going to talk about like both ends of the spectrum, meaning like good or bad. And then I'm going to kind of share my journey of where I now kind of live in the gray with this area, to then like plant some seeds in your own mind to consider, just to consider what both sides have to say and see if you kind of land in the middle as well. And at the end of the day, like there's no wrong answers to this. This is just all information. And I hope that it sparks interest in you and you're able to share it with your clients and provide them the best treatment possible, because that is the goal of this podcast, is to inspire you in an evidence-based manner to then help as many people as possible. If you are someone who likes visual aids better than just audio, this whole podcast is on my YouTube channel as well, and you'll have some visual aids. So you get to see my smile, and then you also get to see some slides and stuff like that. But regardless, we're gonna go ahead and dive in, right? So this is like living in the gray with core stability, with core stability, exemplified by low back pain. So there's a lot in this, right? The first part is like living in the gray. Like I wanna share just kind of what I mean by that. And a lot of times when we are learning a topic or we're learning about, just a topic in general, there's like one side and then the other. Like it's black or it's white. You're either all the way to the left or all the way to the right. Something's good or bad. And whereas living in the gray is kind of like observing both sides, learning from both sides, and then making an informed decision that lands somewhere in the middle. And when we're talking about like core stability, it's like, is core stability a really good thing? Or core stability exercise is like not needed and awful, right? like total waste of time. And we're gonna kind of talk about why I personally live in the middle and why I would encourage you to do the same, because that's really where the research is at. When we're talking about core stability, right? Stability is just your ability to go back to your like neutral alignment or like your normal alignment upon perturbation. Meaning like when something's trying to knock you over, you come back to your normal stance, normal alignment, normal posture, whatever you want to talk about that. Like that's where I'm kind of talking about with stability. Core stability, right, are like your transversus abdominis exercises. These are your deep core stabilization, meaning like your bird dogs, your planks, your all kinds of Pilates things, right? It's like countless exercises. You use your muscles to keep your lumbar spine still, and you do things, right? That's like half the Pilates repertoire. So that's what I'm referring to with core stability. And then low back pain, right? And we're gonna exemplify that as low back pain, or exemplify it through low back pain. And the reason for that is that a lot of times core stability is prescribed as a preventative or a solution to low back pain, right? And so to do that, I want to have like a general definition of what low back pain is, right? And according to the ACSM guidelines, the American College of Sports Medicine, okay, the low back pain definition is pain, muscle tension, or stiffness, okay, localized below the rib margin and above the gluteal folds with or without leg pain. And there's a lot in that, right? So it's pain, muscle tension, or stiffness, right? And it's localized between the rib margin and your inferior gluteal fold. What that means is like it's anywhere like if you're having a pain experience, like between like the bottom of your rib on your backside and the bottom of your butt, right? That's the inferior gluteal fold. Some people call it the thut. If you've never heard that, that's just a mix of thigh and butt, right? Where like your thigh meets your butt, okay, inferior gluteal fold. If you have any pain between there and your backside, that's classified as low back pain, right? Which is like super vague, right? And then it's with or without leg pain, because a lot of like if you're having like I don't know, something going on in the spine, it could send like a radicular symptom, meaning like nerve pain down your leg. Like a popular one is like sciatica, right? So sciatica would be classified as low back pain. But what's really, really important when we're talking about low back pain, which ties into this like whole core stability idea, is the definition of pain, right? And I don't know about you, but like I was not taught the definition of pain in my original Pilates schools. I really learned this when I started studying at Breathe Education and now teach the courses. So pain is defined by the International Association for the Study of Pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage, right? Just studying like pain could be someone's like career, right? Like that's what you are, you're like pain scientist. And I have my own workshop on pain science. But the reason why I'm sharing this this definition is that it's critical to understanding low back pain, because all low back pain is a pain experience, and then low back is a location. So low back pain is just a location and an experience. Where's the location and the low back? What's the experience? It's pain. Well, what is pain? The first part of the definition is like it's an unpleasant sensory and emotional. There's a reason why I highlight the word and. Okay? It's sensory, you feel stuff, but you also have thoughts and emotions about that feeling, right? So it's not just about the tissues, right? Or even about what you're feeling, but how you're feeling about what you're feeling plays a role in the pain experience. In fact, it's part of the definition. It's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Now, the second part says with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. What that word jargon means is like you don't have to have tissue damage to have pain. Okay? Pain is independent of your tissues. As long as like you have a brain, you can have pain. Okay? No brain, no pain. Okay? Meaning that pain is an experience that happens in your brain, and it can be associated with actual tissue damage, right? So like you stub your toe, it hurts, right? If you, but that could cause tissue damage or not. You could break your toe like that, right? If you have a fracture on your foot, it hurts. That's actual tissue damage, right? And you're having a pain experience. But then you can also like not have a pain experience, right? You have mirror neurons in your brain that you can actually feel something by just looking at it, right? Like if anyone if you're scared of scary movies, like we have something in common. I am like hugging the pillows. I'm ridiculous. Like do not have me hold the popcorn during any Halloween movie. I shouldn't even be watching it because I have sensory experiences. Like I feel the stuff. I don't like it, right? I'm having a pain experience and there's no tissue damage. But in the outside of like my own phobia with scary movies, right? Bringing this back to low back pain, okay? You can have pain in your lower back and not have any tissue damage, but you have pain. You can also have tissue damage and have no pain, and we find that all the time. Okay, if you scan, okay, I'll put this in the show notes, but there is a systematic review where they looked at all the literature where we scan people that have no lower back pain. We just give them an MRI and we see what we find, okay? 30% of 20-year-olds have a bulging disc, no pain. 60% of 50-year-olds have a bulging disc and no pain, right? Think of the age of your clientele. Okay, probably like 50. There's some older, some younger. Okay. If you have a population where 60% of them have a condition and no pain, that condition is considered normal. It would actually be abnormal not to have a bulging disc and be 50 years old. Okay. And this goes the same with like spondylolisthesis. Okay, the stats are a little bit lower for that. It's more like 20-30%, and then it goes up a little bit with age. Degenerative disc disease, like if you're like 60 or 70 or something like that, you have like 80% have degenerative disc disease. Yeah? The reason why I share this with you, a lot of times like we'll see that as like a pathoanatomical cause for low back pain, meaning like There's tissue damage, therefore that's why you're having pain. But you cannot explain pain with a biomedical model. A biomedical model means like you have tissue damage, therefore you have pain. Okay? It has failed time and time again. And in fact, 90 to 95% of low back pain, that's 18 out of 20 or 19 out of 20 people with low back pain are classified as non-specific. And what non-specific means is that we do not have a reliable and valid test to specify why this person's having low back pain. Okay? That means only like 1 to 2 out of 20 people can we say this is why you're having back pain confidently. And that's like you have a tumor on your lumbar spine, right? You have a fracture, right? You have a compression fracture, like that's why you're having this pain. There's cauda equina syndrome, right? That's where we're having like nerve irritation in the cauda equina, which is the end of your spinal cord. And then like it's like less than those are like less than 1% of cases, and then like less than 5% of cases are like radiculopathies, which means you're having like nerve root irritation where the nerves come out of the spine, and it's causing pain down your leg. Okay, those are ways where we can be more specific. But when we talk about low back pain, it's like 90 to 95%. We actually can't detect why you're having pain. And we also have zero, not one, but zero valid and reliable tests to show that someone has an unstable spine. And no one has ever, there are zero studies that have ever shown that any kind of instability, even with an invalid test, any kind of instability leads to pain. We don't have it. Okay? It's a logical fallacy, right? Because instability sounds scary. Could you imagine if someone says like, oh, well, your spine's unstable, right? You instantly have a negative association with that. So then the answer to instability would be stabilization, right? And then here we go, core stabilization, okay? So a lot of times, like my point with this, okay, just kind of going back with like, we have no valid tests that we can show someone is unstable. And then, so then like stability sounds like a logical answer, but then we actually don't even know if it's a true problem. So there's just like an issue with that in general. But if you have 90 to 95% of people, we actually don't know why you're having low back pain, right? If we can't specify why you're having pain, we cannot provide you a specific treatment. Okay, a specific treatment requires a specific diagnosis. Low back pain means that you are having an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience, okay, in the lower back. That's what that means. Right? So if you have a really general diagnosis, not specific low back pain is a very general diagnosis. We don't know what's wrong, but it hurts there. You have to give a very general, a general treatment. But you're going to give that treatment based off of client-centered care, meaning like what's really helpful and like what is important to that client, right? So that treatment's it's going to depend on them. Now, when we talk about like core stability for low back pain, like early in my career, okay, I'm just going to share this anecdote. Like I've gone like in every shade of gray with this topic and many others, and I end up in the middle. So if you can relate to this, cool. If not, like even better. In the beginning of my career, right, I was taught a lot of like transversus abdominis activation, right? Like it was the key to all, it was like the key to all problems, right? Engage your transversus abdominis. Everyone needs to do it, especially if you have low back pain, like you need to have transversus abdominis activation, right? That's what I was taught, and it sounded really logical, right? It makes sense, right? It's a corset, it wraps around your spine. You're having pain there. So we need to hold it tight, and we need to protect you, right? It's so well-meaning, right? It's so well-meaning. It's just not true. I don't know how else to put it, right? It's just like we have no evidence to support this. Just to give a little bit of a background, and these like papers will be in the show notes. So the beginning of the idea of like transversus abdominis activation being helpful for core stabilization came from a paper from Hodges and Richardson. I think it was like 1996. And so what they did was they had people do like rapid arm movements. So like you move your arms forward, you move them back and to the side. I think it was like only like 30 people, but it's like this paper still has ripple effects today. And what this was that they found a very small, I think it was like 60 milliseconds, so I could be wrong in the number, but it was like a very small delay in transversus abdominis activation with people that had chronic low back pain. So what it was is that it was hypothesized that individuals with low back pain have this delayed activation. So therefore, that's going to contribute to an unstable spine. And therefore, the logical solution to something that's unstable is stabilize it, right? Like if I have an unstable door hinge, right, I'm going to stabilize the door hinge, and that's gonna solve my problem. But the problem with that kind of thinking with humans is that like we're not doors, we're not cars, we are ecosystems. Okay? The body is a chemical, it's just a big chemical reaction, and we are an ecosystem. And that's why the biomedical model just doesn't work for low back pain. And that's evidenced by us sucking at treating low back pain, which sucks. Like I hate saying that. I really do, because I try to help a lot of people with low back pain. I have helped a lot of people, but it wouldn't be like the largest musculoskeletal cause for disability if we were really good at treating it, because we'd get people back to work. But what we're doing right now, we're just not that good at it. And I think it's okay for us to recognize that. In the biomedical model, we've tried this. Okay, it's still here, and it just doesn't give us optimal results, because just trying to stabilize the low back actually doesn't help low back pain. And so as the years have gone on, right, the way science works is like you get findings, right? You criticize it, you try to test it, and then you retest it, and you redo the design over and over again. And sometimes you end up not being able to reproduce your original results, right? So then that questions the validity of the original results and if we can actually apply it to the real world. Whereas if we find a result in your first study, and then you keep replicating those results time and time and time again, we have more confidence in that, and that we can actually share that and help people with whatever the given solution is. However, in the case of transversus abdominis activation, we have tried to replicate this, and we can't. So, like for example, they tried to go ahead and do this in, I believe, like 2010. They had an ultrasound tissue Doppler in imaging test, where they did the same thing. They had more people, so they had like 90, I think it was 96 individuals, where they did rapid arm movements, and they tested lateral abdominal contractions, right? So your obliques, your transversus abdominis, things of that nature. And we wanted to see the timing of that with both people that had low back pain and people that don't have low back pain. And the summary here in that paper says patients with chronic low back pain did not show a delayed onset of feed-forward activation of the lateral abdominal muscles during rapid arm movement. In other words, individuals with low back pain don't have a delayed firing of the transversus abdominis. So meaning that encouraging people to engage first and then move, which is a common strategy. I've done it 100 times. Do not feel guilty. If you've done it, if you do it, don't, you're fine, right? This is just sharing information and posing questions with not just my opinions, but some research. Doing this, all right, make sure you engage, then you lift your leg up. Make sure you engage, then press the bar out. This is really well-meaning, right? And it stems from this idea that we need to have a feed-forward effect for transversus abdominis activation, which means you need to engage it first, and then that prepares you to move, right? That's where this comes from. But it just turns out to not be true. So that was just like an RTC, meaning a randomized controlled trial. That's an experiment, right? So they did an experiment. But then we have different levels of evidence, right? So sometimes when we do enough experiments, we can get what's called a systematic review, which means that there's very rigorous criteria that we have to follow, or that not we, I don't do the research, but that researchers have to follow, and they try to answer a research question. And what they do is they review all the available literature to answer a single research question. And what they found in the systematic review seeking the relevance of transversus abdominis activation in regards to low back pain was that it's irrelevant. To tell you the truth, they did a systematic review, and this was called "Do Changes in Transversus Abdominis and Lumbar Multifidus During Conservative Treatment Explain Changes in Clinical Outcomes Related to Non-Specific Low Back Pain?" A systematic review. What that question means is does it matter? Is there any relevance of transversus abdominis activation and lumbar multifidus during a low back pain episode? So the conclusion stated, this review highlights that temporal changes just means timing. This review highlights that temporal changes in transversus abdominis features tend to be unrelated to corresponding low back pain and low back pain related disability improvements, whereas the relationship between multifidus changes and clinical improvements remain uncertain. So in other words, we feel confident, right? The researchers within the systematic review, they reviewed all the literature on transversus abdominis activation in relation to low back pain. They found that it's irrelevant. Okay? Sometimes it's faster, sometimes you have a faster activation, sometimes you have slower activation, sometimes it's right in the middle. There's just no correlation. And then in regards to multifidus, they just don't know, right? Which is usually there just isn't enough literature and things of that nature. So that's all cool, right? It's oh, okay. I want to share with you, if you're just if this is new, don't worry. You don't ever have to feel guilty for sharing information that you were taught to share. And I bet you've helped a ton of people with your transversus abdominis activation exercises, and you can continue to help people if you so choose to. I just also want to share, I just want to put forth that it's also possible to not do that and also help the same amount of people. Okay? Because it turns out that regardless of treatment, 90% of acute low back pain clients or patients, they get better regardless of treatment, right? It doesn't matter what we do, right? It does not matter what we do. If we do core stability, if we do deadlifts, if we do Pilates, if we do yoga, it doesn't matter, right? 90% of them are going to get better regardless. Which kind of poses the question, I had this question of so I'm worthless, right? I don't make a difference at all. No, that's not what this is saying at all. You're making all the world of a difference, but sometimes you're making a difference in ways that you don't even know, right? Maybe you're providing social support for someone. Maybe you are encouraging, maybe you're sending a message that they need core activation, right? And then you confirm with them oh, you're doing it right? You're doing awesome. You've gotten so much better, right? And it's in relation to core activation. And then their symptoms start to get better over time, right? And we're oh, see, you're starting, you're really engaging your transversus abdominis. You're being really strong in your plank. Your form is so much better, right? Do you see how your back's feeling better? Maybe we're sending that dialogue, okay? And I'm just playing in the gray here, right? Cool. The client may believe that they're getting better because they're doing really good at the transversus abdominis activation. But what this research is suggesting is that it has nothing to do with their transversus abdominis activation. And we also, just by looking at it, can't, we can't determine the timing of the transversus abdominis activation. We can just be confident in what we believe. But where you may actually be helping this client is encouraging their physical activity, right? Enhancing their expectations that they're going to get better by letting them know they're doing really good, by encouraging them to continue to come into the studio. Maybe you're providing social support for them. You're providing, facilitating success. There's all these other things. Maybe because they're exercising more, they're getting less inflammation. They're getting better sleep. Okay? Our exercises have a really, really general effect. So you're helping people regardless if you do core stability or not. So that's like one end of the spectrum, right? It's like I do the core stability, right? And I help people. But then this like information is telling me that like I'm not helping people, right? And I just want to tell you, like, yes, you are helping people. Like sometimes we're just not helping people for the reasons that we think we are, and that's okay, right? Because like Maya Angelou said, like you do the best you can, like, and then when you know better, you do better, and just keep learning, right? Like I'm continuing to learn and change the way I do things. Like an anecdote, right? Like I think it was like 2 weeks ago. Like I deleted every YouTube video that I had because I actually haven't uploaded one in like 2 years. I saw what I was teaching 2 years ago, and I was kind of mortified. To be honest, I was like, this is so not me, but it was me, right? I totally changed, right? In other words, I've grown, and I encourage the same for you, right? So like I'm in the arena with you. So one end of the spectrum here, we're like core stability, right? And then like the other end of the spectrum is like, see, I knew it didn't work. Transverse abdominis, no way, right? Like it's awful, it's bad. Would be like the other end of the spectrum. And I've lived there too, right? Like when I learned this, I was like, I felt like a fraud. I had a sense of like almost like anger. Frustration. I think frustration is probably a better word, right? Like frustration with like my previous education that taught me the stuff. And so I went like anti-core stability. Like I refuse to cue it. I refuse to refer to it. I don't really cue it much anymore. And that's also fine, right? Like you can never cue it, and that's totally cool. But what I want to highlight is that just because we show that transverse abdominis timing has no relationship to low back pain doesn't mean that core stability doesn't work, right? Which kind of brings us into another conversation of just core stability exercises in general. And there has been heaps and heaps of research on this. In fact, in the show notes, I'll do like a literature dump of a bunch of systematic reviews, meaning reviews of literature, anywhere, I think it goes from 2006 to 2020, and they all found the same thing, right? There's one that found that core stability exercises were superior to general exercise, but what was it, like 8 out of 9? I don't know, some number, 8 out of 9, 7 out of 8, something like that. The reviews consistently find that core stability exercises are not superior to general exercise or even manual therapy, right? In treating acute or chronic low back pain. What does that mean, right? Core stability exercises are not superior. It does not mean that core stability exercises are inferior. It means that they're equally effective as general exercise. They're equally effective as manual therapy. Manual therapy is always done with exercise, so it's hard to separate that out because that's against guideline-based care or any, like I've learned manual therapy, like never been taught to just do it, right? So that's like its another category. So I just assume exercise with manual therapy on that. They consistently find that they give the same results, right? So what does that mean, right? So confusing. Like, what do I do, right? It points to how the biomedical model is it's not your answer, right? The specific type of exercise is not your answer to helping your clients with low back pain. Meaning it's not like your only answer, right? Like people should exercise, but they should exercise in a way that they like, right? Because we just need to get people moving, okay? Just get people moving. And if you're someone who really likes core stability, right? Like you feel really confident in that, teach it, do it, right? Because your confidence in what you're teaching is going to play a role in your client's recovery. Okay? Because just your confidence, right? Like you feeling strongly about your client's recovery, that this is really going to help you, okay? That can help boost your client's expectations in their recovery, which is where the magic actually is enhancing your client's expectations that they're going to get better. Because the core strength doesn't predict recovery from low back pain, but people's beliefs do predict it. Okay? And that's where we want to, that's why the ACSM guidelines, as well as just global guidelines, meaning guidelines around the world, continue to point to the biopsychosocial model for treating low back pain. And that's its own podcast. Honestly, I work at Breathe, we spend 4 months in a model, in a module, right? So we spend 14 weeks, and there's a 2-week break, 14 weeks just studying the biopsychosocial model. So there's a lot in it. But if that's a new word for you, I just want to plant that seed of looking into it, okay? Because this is a model that's changed the shape in which I practice. And the biopsychosocial model is the prevailing model for helping someone with low back pain. And you can put core stability in there, and you can also take core stability out of there, and you're going to help people just as much. Okay? You can do it. And what the biopsychosocial model means is there's 3 elements. Okay? There's bio, there's psycho, and then there's social. Bio refers to biology, or in our case, biomechanics, right? So this is your tissues, your living tissue, okay? Tissue health, your alignment, the load that you put on the tissues, your physical activity, things like that. That's bio. Then there's biopsycho, because it's biopsychosocial. Then the psycho aspect refers to psychology, right? So those are your thoughts and your emotions, right? What are your beliefs about exercise? What are your beliefs about pain? Because that's going to be way more important than the specific exercise you choose for someone. And that doesn't mean that you don't have value. You have a ton of value because you can influence someone's thoughts about their exercise. Oh yeah, you can do core stability exercises without teaching someone that they're unstable. Hear that again and share it with everyone you know. You can teach core stability exercises without teaching people that they're unstable. You can just do it because it's an exercise, right? It's like a task, it's a game, okay? I have no problem with core stability exercises. I just want to highlight that how you communicate about it is way more important than the exercise. Bio, psychosocial. So you have your bio, right? Your biomechanics, the tissue, your living tissue. Then you have psycho, right? Your thoughts and your emotions about your lived experience. Then you have social, right? Which is your social aspects. Do you have social support, right? Do you have a therapeutic alliance with your clients? That's huge, right? Therapeutic alliance, for those that are unaware, is that you and your client like and trust each other. If your client likes you and trusts you, you'll get better outcomes. And the way that you can kind of think about that is if my client doesn't like me and my client doesn't trust me, what happens? Do you think they're gonna do their home exercises or take your advice and things like that? No way, right? They're gonna hold a grudge. I don't know why they would keep paying and coming in, but maybe it happens. Okay? So building a trusting relationship where you and your client like and trust each other is huge. Okay? And then that helps influence their thoughts and their emotions about exercise. Because when someone likes and trusts you, they're more likely to not only hear you, but listen to you. And then when you're doing the exercises, what you're doing to the tissues, okay, you can do core stability exercises, right? I have no problem with that. You can also not do core stability exercises, and you can just do contrology, right? Contrology meaning fast, jerky movement, right? You can do more classical Pilates where it's more flowy and more controlled. You could do more contemporary Pilates where it's you go into the minutia, right? And that's just one form, right? I've seen it, I've seen the Popliteus cute in contemporary videos. That is so weird. Which is not anything against contemporary, right? Someone may classify me as contemporary. Cool. You could teach more like contemporary, but like big group classes. You can help people, and where you lie in the middle, right, is where an evidence-based Pilates instructor lives. Okay? Living in the gray with so many topics, including core stability. Okay? There is nothing wrong with core stability, but you also don't need it. Meaning you don't need to do a specific exercise for core stability. You could do back squats and probably have a stronger core, right? Because you do a ton of core work with that. You could do deadlifts, totally cool. You'll work your core a ton, right? It's not about core stability. But the message that I really like, if you take one message away from our time this week, it is that the specific exercise that you choose for your clients with or without low back pain, okay, is not as important as the dialogue that you build around that exercise. For example, if you are teaching someone like a double leg stretch. Double leg stretch is you're on your back, it's a mat exercise, you stretch your legs forward, arms go overhead, you circle the arms and you hug the knees in. And let's just say we're doing it and we're trying to keep the low back still, because I know there's a rocking version of that too. But let's say the idea is like keeping the pelvis and the lumbar spine still. There are many ways that you can talk about that exercise, right? So you can say things like, make sure you hollow belly button the spine, make sure you wrap that corset around your waist, or you engage your transversus abdominis. Now carefully extend your legs out, don't let your pelvis tilt. Okay, keep your low back still, make sure to stabilize. These things can create a sense of worry. There's also a lot of words, right? We'll do motor learning later on, where that's just a problem in its own right. And so it's like we're saying these things, but it's like how you're saying it, right? That could be problematic. Whereas if you could teach the same exercise, want to have the same goal, and it can be a totally different experience, right? You can create more of a positive movement experience and have more movement optimism within that. You can say something like, all right, so you're gonna press your back down into the mat, right? Let's just say that. You're gonna press your back down into the mat. Now here's the game. Go ahead and keep your back on the mat and stretch your legs forward. Good, stay nice and strong in your center. Or you could even say, yeah, keep your core on, you're doing awesome, right? All these things, okay, whether it be internal cues or external cues, whatever, okay? What's the message that you're sending to someone? Are you sending someone that they're fragile and that they need to be careful or else they're going to break? Or are we sending the message that they're anti-fragile, that they're incredible, that movement is to be explored, right? And that is the juice. What is the dialogue that you are talking about when it comes to core stability and low back pain, right? Or when it comes to any movement, okay, there's a much bigger message than just like the living in the gray with core stability exemplified by low back pain. This is an overarching message, right? What is the dialogue that you're sharing, right? And there are many times like that I look back, right? I could look back like 2 weeks, or I could look back 2 years and been like, I could have done that better, right? Or sometimes we're having lunch and like I could have done better at my 9 a.m. And this isn't meant to be like critical or anything. It's just a exploration and remaining curious and encouraging you to continue to grow. And that's what I have for you this week. Okay, living in the gray with core stability exemplified by low back pain. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. There will be weekly episodes. If you have any questions, please go ahead and reach out to me anytime, okay? I'm always here for you, and have an incredible rest of your week.